Very proud to announce that we're going to be doing even more work this year with this video's sponsor, Lost and Colt. You may remember them from that incredible Outer Wilds commemorative book they put together featuring over 250 pages of essays, interviews, and perspectives on one of the greatest games ever made. Lost and Colt do these sorts of books and collections regularly, and they've got some incredible stuff lined up for 2025, including a Legacy of Kain project, which I may or may not be a little bit involved in. To learn more, click the link below or stick around to the end of the video. Okay, so Assassin's Creed Shadows. So for a bit of context, I want to say a few things about my relationship to AC games and to Ubisoft games more broadly. First of all, contrary to popular belief, I actually like Ubisoft games, generally speaking. We all like to dunk on their fairly formulaic approach to game making, but sometimes you're just in the mood for that sort of open world, map marker driven, tick the things off the list kind of time, and I'm not immune to the allure of that sort of experience, particularly when it comes to Far Cry. I love that shit. Last year was a rough year for Ubisoft, but I personally really liked both Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown and the Rogue Prince of Persia. I didn't hate Skull and Bones as much as a lot of other people did, and I actually enjoyed Star Wars Outlaws despite its many obvious shortcomings. Hell, I even had a kind word for X-Defiant, so I guess I liked that game more than Ubisoft's management did, since they shut that shit down just a few months after it launched. So those are my Ubisoft takes. What about my Assassin's Creed takes? Well, that's a little more complicated. Assassin's Creed Black Flag is one of my favorite games ever, but the more modern AC games have been really hit and miss for me. I didn't love Origins. I liked Odyssey, despite the fact that there was a solid 25 hours of that just felt like grindy bullshit designed to sell XP boosters. I quite enjoyed the first 20 or so hours of AC Valhalla until I eventually came to loathe it because the game just would not fucking end. And AC Mirage, I found myself quite disappointed by it. It set up a really nice, focused foundation centered on stealth, but it never evolved after that. It just made the forts bigger, plus the writing was abysmal, the worst written AC game yet, I think. But here's the thing, the modern AC trilogy games have been phenomenally successful for Ubisoft. Generally speaking, people love them. They are critical and commercial hits. Ubisoft have a winning formula, so they are naturally going to be more inclined towards trying to please fans who already love the modern AC games, rather than trying to reinvent the formula too drastically to win over people like myself who are less enamored of the series. I provide all this context so you know where I'm coming from when I talk about an AC game, and all of that is a big preamble to the substance of my impressions, which is me talking about why I did not enjoy the 5 hours I spent playing Assassin's Creed Shadows. And that is actually quite a unique experience for me, given that even the AC games I didn't like, I still kind of enjoyed them in their opening chapters, because the world was new, and you were meeting new characters, and you were getting to grips with the newer evolved game systems. My issues with modern AC games would always begin to emerge after that honeymoon period wore off. But for me personally, there wasn't really any honeymoon period here, as it kind of just felt like I was meeting a number of core design and narrative issues very quickly. I'm going to cover a fair amount of ground in this video, so I want to make clear my central thesis, and that is that the decision to split out the core modern AC fantasy into two separate characters, each with their own unique playstyles, that sounds like a really good idea on paper, and maybe it is, but so far, for me, the execution is not working. Modern AC gameplay has always been a balance of stealth, parkour, and full frontal combat, with much more focus on that full frontal combat part of the equation. Personally, I think that each of these core systems are pretty weak on their own. Like, no one's out here saying that AC combat is S tier, and no one's saying that the stealth sandbox is as sophisticated as Metal Gear or Hitman, but because you can move between these gameplay styles so freely, it all sort of hung together. The thing that makes AC Shadows unique compared to the other modern AC trilogy games is that instead of one main character having access to the full combat, stealth, and parkour sandbox, they've essentially split these fantasies across two separate characters. Yasuke embodies the samurai fantasy, and he's all about full frontal assault and literally barging through doors. Naoe embodies the shinobi fantasy, which is actually largely analogous to the overall Assassin's Creed fantasy. She's focused on stealth, misdirection, leaping across rooftops to scout a location, finding hidden entrances to buildings, etc. But she can also throw down, and she's just as lethal up close as she is from a distance with a shuriken. For this reason, AC Shadows is a game comprised of three parts: combat, stealth, and parkour, and only Naoe has access to all three of those parts. As a result, when you're playing as her, it feels like the game works because all of the game's systems are being leveraged and the assassin's fantasy is center stage. It works. But when you're playing as Yasuke, you really only have access to 1/3 of the game's systems, combat, and I don't think it works. Yasuke's stealth capabilities are much more limited and his parkour capabilities are way more limited. Like, this guy is clearly meant to stay on the ground, for sure. As a result, all Yasuke really has to rely on is his combat, and unfortunately it's not good combat. again, I don't think modern AC combat has ever been particularly good, but you also had other tools to rely on, so you weren't fighting all of the time. But as Yasuke, you're fighting all of the time, and it's the same combat from previous AC games, which is very sloppy and animation paired, resulting in limbs teleporting everywhere, and the whole thing feels very arcadey. The bigger problem with it is that Yasuke is incredibly fast. The speed of his strikes, how short his animation recovery times are, how quickly he can dodge and how much distance he covers during those dodges, the speed of his various special moves and how he sort of streaks like a bolt of lightning across the battlefield. He's meant to be this massive, lumbering force of nature, but none of that power is communicated through his combat because he seems just as spry, quick, and agile as Naoe is. Plus, Yasuke is like borderline invincible. I don't think I died once while playing with him for 3.5 hours. He deals so much damage, he is so fast and so resilient that it's legitimately difficult to die. Just to give you an example of how much of a unit this man is, he can obviously burst through doors when you sprint. It's how Yasuke progresses through levels when Naoe has to find another way around. But Yasuke isn't just limited to charging through wooden doors, he can also charge through concrete balustrades. While looking at this happening, I was like, Ubisoft, I think you may have overtuned this guy just a little bit. That over-reliance on subpar, poorly tuned combat is definitely a problem, but there's also the fact that Yasuke isn't built to make good use of the game's other core systems, stealth and parkour. In the case of stealth, he can sneak, but he's so big there are smaller spaces he can't sneak through. More importantly, he can assassinate people, but only a brutal assassination, which is very loud. Obviously, that sort of assassination is going to attract a lot of attention, so Yasuke's assassinations are typically used at the start of an engagement to dispatch one foe before a bigger fight breaks out, rather than a tool allowing you to clear an entire section of enemies without being detected. Parkour is the really big dividing line between Yasuke and Naoe. So Yasuke can do some very limited parkour, but he's much slower while doing it, and you can see him really struggling to mantle up ledges or whatever. And yes, that feels very authentic and believable, but I never really wanted an Assassin's Creed character who can't parkour well, and now that I've got one, I definitely don't like it. There are also harsher limitations on Yasuke's parkour that are frankly kind of annoying. So when you're not in the middle of a main mission, you can actually freely switch between Naoe and Yasuke by opening the menu and holding down a button. At that point, you enter a loading screen, the world repopulates around you, and you're standing in roughly the same spot as you were before, but as the other character. When I sat down for my playthrough, I really wanted to play as Yasuke as much as possible because, to be honest, I'm actually really interested in his storyline. So I chose Yasuke at the start of my playthrough, and in typical AC fashion, I opened up my map so I could see the nearest synchronization tower. That unlocked loads of map markers for me, helped me get my bearings, etc. I see the tower, I mark it, I head over to it, and I begin climbing it, and no sooner do I do that than Yasuke says this.
Naoe could reach the top of that pagoda if she wanted to challenge.
This was the game's way of telling me that Yasuke actually can't climb this tower, only Naoe can. She has a grappling hook that lets her rappel straight up, whereas Yasuke can't do that. And so in order to sink this tower, I had to open up the menu, sit through the loading screen, load in as Naoe, climb the tower, and then switch back to Yasuke. Again, I never asked for an Assassin's Creed main character who couldn't climb a tower, and I don't think forcing me to change characters to get the job done was particularly smart design. So that's an example of how a lot of AC Shadows works, in that the level design is built to accommodate two separate characters with two distinct playstyles. And that example is one where it's kind of silly, but there are other examples where it's actually kind of interesting. The previous slice we played culminated in a final mission that involved ascending a tower to assassinate someone, and these missions are very structured in that they have cutscenes, and at the end of each of these cutscenes you choose who you want to continue the mission as, and that decision will greatly impact how the rest of the mission plays out. If you're playing as Yasuke, you can literally just break down a door and start ascending the tower level by level, dispatching every goon as you do. If you're playing as Naoe, you can't break through that same door, so you need to find another way in. That forces you to climb the tower from the outside. This meant I skipped a huge amount of fighting on the way up, and I was able to assassinate a few people when I finally got in. I also noticed that the level design itself was very different based on who I was playing as. I got to this section here as Yasuke and it was all blocked off, but as Naoe, these boxes were removed, revealing a hidden passage that let me get in under the floorboard so I could get past a locked door. So it is really interesting that there are two ways to experience the same mission, leaning into two totally separate fantasies. One of them kicking down the door and 1v1ing everyone in sight, and the other was about exploration, stealth, and assassination, with a little bit of combat thrown in as well. But here's the kicker. It's boring to kick down the door and 1v1 everyone in this game. I played this final mission at the end of my 5-hour-long session. I played it first as Yasuke and then as Naoe, and it was the mission that really crystallized how I felt about this game, because I was honestly really bored playing as Yasuke throughout most of my hands-on session, and when I was playing as Naoe, I was like, you know what? I'm having some fun here. It wasn't incredible Game of the Year level fun, but it was enough for me to be like, yeah, this is working. But I just don't think it works as Yasuke. It just doesn't. And when I do eventually play this for review, I'll probably be playing as little Yasuke as possible, because you can choose to main one character or another throughout most or potentially all of your playthrough. And you might say, well, what are you complaining about then? Just play the character you prefer, right? Well, yeah, but I would have liked to have played as an assassin samurai. That would have been pretty cool. And Yasuke's limited stealth and parkour combined with his overpowered combat capabilities make him very unfun to play, I think. I wish I had better things to say about the game's writing, but unfortunately I don't. Again, I spent 5 hours with both Yasuke and Naoe, and they felt so lifeless and dull, almost robotic. They're united by some form of grief and fueled by a commitment to honor. If you're going to have two separate protagonists, then I feel like that would have been an opportunity to have two very different personality types that kind of play off each other. While there may be some differences that emerge over the course of a broader playthrough, I saw none of those differences here, and both of them felt rather interchangeable with one another in their dialogue, their worldview, and the sort of reception they got from people talking to them. Narratively, this section of the game was a little tough to follow. It was about unmasking a mysterious figure, but similar to AC Mirage, that just involved clicking on pieces of paper that were laying around in different places, and then somehow you piece together who the bad guy is, and then it's off to go kill them. While doing all this, I never met a single interesting character who seemed to have any personality. Everyone I met felt as stilted and as lifeless as the main characters I was controlling. Obviously, we can't judge a game's writing and narrative based on just 5 hours with it, but I will say that nothing in that 5 hours left a great impression. I unfortunately have similar things to say about the world design and exploration. Ubisoft are on record as saying that this will be a less map marker driven game than in the past, but that wasn't my experience playing it for 5 hours. It was still about sinking those towers, selecting those map markers, and then heading toward them. The one spin on this was kind of a bummer actually. At one point the game introduces me to something called the Scout system, which on paper sounds really cool. The way it's explained is that Yasuke and Naoe are cultivating a network of spies, and that by feeding them the necessary supply resources, you can dispatch these spies/scouts to distant lands to scout ahead for you. And okay, that sounds pretty cool, right? Like, I'm imagining these scouts are NPCs that I meet and recruit. They have personalities, maybe a bit of banter. Maybe they run up to me while I'm out exploring the world to, report their findings, etc. All of those were very incorrect assumptions. What the Scout system actually is a map pinging system. At various points, you'll get clues about where to go next, just as they've done in previous AC games, actually. So they'll say the target is in the southeast part of this district, in a temple. And all you do is move a cursor on the map over the spot where you think it might be. You push the Scout button, and if you guess correctly, then the map marker will appear. And that's it. That's the scouting system. It's an entirely menu-driven affair that actually discourages you from exploring and makes you even more reliant on map markers than if this system didn't exist at all. I also really struggled with the responsiveness of the world. Pretty quickly I realized that Yasuke was borderline invincible, so I was like, okay, let's just start killing people and see what happens. And so here I am, just indiscriminately murdering people in the streets, and no one is doing anything about it. There's no royal guard dispatched to bring me to heal, no wanted system. I just kill people without any consequence. There's also no moral consequences. Here, I just brutally murder an innocent, unarmed serving woman, and there's nothing telling me like, hey man, you probably shouldn't do that. It feels incredibly out of keeping with the nature of Yasuke's character and the broader sense of social justice that is the creed of the assassins. So look, I obviously was pretty scathing in this preview, so I want to say a few things to wrap it up and round it out. Firstly, do recall that I'm not the biggest fan of modern AC games. Some of them I thought were okay to good, some of them I straight up didn't like. As such, I'm probably not the target audience for AC Shadows, because this is a game that is clearly targeting the people that enjoy modern AC games, and rightly so. So, as always, I do encourage you to seek out other previews from people who do love modern AC games more than I do. Their perspective is going to be really valuable, more valuable than mine, I'd say. Secondly, I spent most of my playthrough playing as Yasuke, and I really believe that you are going to have a vastly different and vastly better experience playing this game as Naoe. Because like I said earlier, she's able to make full use of the AC sandbox, combat, stealth, and parkour, whereas Yasuke is basically just combat. I think that the amount of time I spent with Yasuke really skewed my overall impressions, but at the same time, Yasuke is one of the main characters. He's, you know, got a storyline that I personally am really interested to see, and he's the only way to play the samurai combat style that I'm really into. I don't believe that there should be a bad or lesser choice when it comes to a main character, but Yasuke kind of feels like that at this point, and I think that giving him so few stealth or parkour options was a mistake, because you could have had two equally capable assassins who just so happen to have very different core fighting styles. Ubisoft have gone for something more novel and more ambitious and more interesting here, absolutely, and full credit to them for doing that, but so far, I don't think it's working. And finally, to conclude, I really want to stress the so far part of that sentence. This was just 5 hours hands-on and only a specific section of the game. It is of course entirely possible that the final product is way better because the writing starts to pop off, or maybe the mission design makes great use of Yasuke's more limited kit, or maybe the open world is full of surprises. I don't know, so please don't look at this or any preview as a definitive judgment on the game. That comes with the full review. These are my own personal impressions, having played just 5 hours of what I expect will be a 50 to 60 to 70 plus hour game, so I really do leave lots of room for the possibility that I end up enjoying this, but yeah, so far, not feeling great about this one. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check back in March for the full review. Thanks. Last year, we promoted 2 collections from this video's sponsor, Lost in Cold, and I'm proud to announce that they want to keep working with us because they got such an incredible amount of support from you all, so thanks for checking them out and supporting what they do. If you haven't heard of them before, Lost in Cold celebrate the art form of video games in a variety of beautiful and thoughtful ways. Take their recent Outer Wilds design work collection. This features over 250 pages of interviews, essays, and perspectives on the game that forever changed the way we think about video games, a really special way to celebrate and commemorate a really special game. Lost in Cold did something similar for the original Dead Space. Make Us Whole is 272 pages of behind-the-scenes deep dives, interviews, and essays exploring how one of the greatest horror games ever made came to be. Again, that one also comes in a standard or signed edition, with a few special flourishes on that signed edition for your collecting pleasure. If you're into music, Lost in Cold also do CD and vinyl collections, like their C-Smash VSR vinyl, which celebrates the soundtrack of the iconic Dreamcast game that was recently reimagined and re-released on modern platforms. They're even working directly with Crystal Dynamics on a Legacy of Kain tabletop game and official encyclopedia. That campaign launches in just a few days, so don't forget to sign up for updates over on the backer kit, link in the description below. I can't say much yet, but I can reveal that I'm helping out with that one in a very, very small way, so stay tuned. There's so much more that Lost in Cold has to offer, way too much for me to list here, so I really do encourage you to click through and see all of the incredible stuff they've done, or are doing, or will do. In an era when physical media is getting harder and harder to come by, it's nice to see an outfit still printing books and pressing vinyls, allowing us to not only learn more and celebrate the things we love, but also looking great on our shelves while doing it. Visit lostincult.co.uk to see it all, and be sure to use offer code SKILLUP at checkout for 5% off any order. That's lostincult.co.uk, and use offer code SKILLUP at checkout for 5% off your order. Thanks Lost in Cult for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.